Mistake-prone broadcast this morning. Appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning. Yesterday, I meant to hit a stop record button, and it hit stop streaming. But we were able to get that second segment up for you, so hopefully you're able to check that out with Awake Illinois founder Shannon Adcock. But here we are, live here on Bishop on Air, across the inner tubes, on YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. Thanks for hanging out with us each and every weekday morning. Coffee with Bishop, Rawhide says. That's good to see you guys. The live stream viewers are stacking up. Everybody from Sergio to Chris to Chubby Guy Customs Garage. Some of what we got coming up today, we will definitely open it up for your Discord calls. And the link in the description for Discord should work. So either use that or go to bishoponair.com and you should see a Discord link there as well. But what we'll do is we'll open things up a little bit later on for you to sound off on whether or not Chicago should get rid of the shot spotter technology. So that's going to be our caller segment. But to do that, you got to head over to the Discord channel. So we'll get that staging area set up for you. If you want to sound off on that, then you can do so. All right, so go ahead and get in that set up. If you want to join the Discord there, just keep listening to wherever you're listening to this live, and we'll line your calls up at the tail end of the program here. And it just told me it disconnected again, but we're back, apparently. All right. Gotta love it. Living in rural Illinois. I don't even think I'm living in rural Illinois, for crying out loud. All right, stay tuned. Well, despite the ongoing litigation against Illinois' gun ban now going up to the U.S. Supreme Court with several cases asking for them to hear the challenge to Illinois' gun and magazine ban, you've got the Southern District of Illinois continuing on with the challenge there. In 4 plaintiffs' groups, they've continued forward dealing with the merits of the issue. You've got a status hearing that's set for the 28th where attorneys for the plaintiffs are going to go through and they're going to take a look at what kind of evidence and testimony and witnesses and the like they're going to do as they work towards discovery. Of course, Judge Stephen McGlynn down there in the Southern District has said that they are not going to delay this any further. They're going to get to the merits of this case, and we see that timeline working out here. But all of that, of course, was dealing with like the Second Amendment questions. But if you recall, Thomas Magg, the attorney for the Langley plaintiffs, he challenged the law not just on the Second Amendment, he also challenged on the 14th Amendment vagueness and also the Fifth Amendment challenge. And we've tracked the Fifth Amendment challenge on the merits where the plaintiffs, the Langley plaintiffs, are asking for summary judgment. And if you recall, earlier last month, the state did respond to the Langley plaintiffs. And let's just review that here, because here with Bishop on Air, we've been tracking how this happens. And of course, I hope you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. If you want to support the program, I'm just doing this in my own home. You can buy some Bishop on Air merchandise, coffee cup, sweatshirt, whatever the case may be. But we've been tracking this, of course, and all the different ins and outs of the state trying to dismiss the Fifth Amendment arguments and the court saying, no, we're moving forward with that argument. They even had a hearing on the vagueness issue, if you recall, but the judge did deny that motion to find the law unconstitutional on vagueness grounds. So now we're on the Fifth Amendment challenge, and the states responded to Thomas Magg last month. Let's pull that up so you can follow along here. And just to kind of review some of the overview here in the introduction, They say in their 19-page filing that the endorsement affidavit is not directed at the criminality of the suspect and does not compel a confession of criminal activity. The endorsement affidavit does not compel or coerce any testimony, and the possibility that plaintiffs will be prosecuted based off their endorsement affidavit is not real and substantial, and plaintiffs should not be granted leave to add a new due process claim. So that was what the state ultimately said in their filing, and you go through and you find out that, for your call, the state did say that it is not against the law to not file an endorsement affidavit, and that is, of course, the registration of banned firearms. So the state made that case. And all while we're looking at that, you've also got the latest numbers of the gun ban registry not being updated, and just doing a refresh here on that page from the Illinois State Police, how many people have actually registered firearms. And it hasn't been updated. Still stuck there at the most recent update from January 31st, where an additional 6,200 on top of the 29,000 have registered of 2.4 million firearm owner ID card holders. So you have that still out there. So the state's saying that, the Langley plaintiffs should not be able to have their argument be sustained. They talk about, responding to Haney's v. United States, which is a Supreme Court precedent about the Fifth Amendment. Oh, and just for those who don't know what the Fifth Amendment is, the Fifth Amendment is your right to not incriminate yourself. It's your right to not be compelled to speak in a manner that's going to possibly leave you open to criminal liability. So the argument is that the Fifth Amendment right precludes somebody being required to file an endorsement affidavit. So let's get to, I guess what the state's response to was that, if you recall, they ultimately just boiled it down and said that from their understanding, it doesn't compel people to do this. It's merely a suggestion, an easier way for individuals to keep and have those grandfathered firearms legally. So you've got, again, let's check out what the state had to say here. An endorsement affidavit identifies the weapon and affirms that the individual owned it before January 10th of 2023. The exemption recognizes people who lawfully possessed assault weapons before this date have a reliance interest in retaining possession of items legally acquired before such acquisition. Meanwhile, the state's interest in reducing the number of assault weapons in circulation can be accomplished by restricting the sale, purchase, and possession of new ones. Thus, it reflects the legislative compromise, promoting both the reliance interest of the law-abiding gun owners and the legitimate governmental interest in reducing the number of mass shootings. So again, just a little bit of insight into what the state is thinking when they responded to Thomas Magg's filing on the Fifth Amendment. Well, earlier this week, Thomas Magg filed the response to the state's response, and here is how that reads out. It's about 20 some odd pages with several attachments to it. But it says, come now, the Langley plaintiffs, by their own attorneys, Thomas Magg and Magg Law Firm. And the introduction spells out, as attributed to the American philosopher George Santayana. I'm not familiar with that. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Familiar with that quote, though. It goes on to say that in drafting the so-called Protect Illinois Communities Act, the proponents of the same were in such a hurry to get the statute, in fact, any such statute, on the books that they utterly ignored the Illinois Constitution's 3 readings requirements. The requirement designed to slow the passage of legislation to improve its quality fell into a trap that, had they spent a week or two researching why prior firearms laws have been declared unconstitutional, might have avoided this issue instead. Like the Light Brigade, they rode headlong into the valley of death for statutes well guarded by Haney's and its Fifth Amendment. Similarly, the defendants were so desperate to respond to the Fifth Amendment issue that it literally argued a summary judgment motion without a single document, affidavit, or attachment attached. Then it goes through the facts. It says the simple fact is that PICA purports to require ordinary persons, even today, who possess unregistered PICA-regulated firearms to register them. The ISP on its own webpage states, failing to comply and submit the required endorsement affidavit while in possession of items regulated by PICA prior to January 1st, 2024 is in violation of Illinois law, specifically the FOID and the Criminal Code of 2012, unless the individual is exempt. Sentences range, and it spells it out. A person who violates these requirements may be arrested and charged. Well, again, before the January 1st deadline, right? But we have people who have registered firearms after that January 1st deadline. In the whole month of January, actually, you've got 6,226 people who registered after that January 1st deadline. Back to the argument that Mag's making here. This is the exact situation that existed 61 days after the enactment of the original 1934 version of the Federal Firearms Act, the NFA. Regulated firearms to be registered with the IRS within 60 days of passage. As stated in the Seventh Circuit of the original National Firearms Act, registration would be an admission that another section or other sections of the act have been violated and might support the conviction by a court. Likewise, the Seventh Circuit also stated, we do not think that the fact that there might be cases where registration would not result in incrimination by the registrant is any answer to the contention that one who's required to register might thereby incriminate himself. Mag's argument filed this week goes on saying that defendant argues about past conduct and incrimination. What past conduct can registration affidavit, an Orwellian euphemism for a firearm registration form, provide that might incriminate the registration? How about the most obvious? The same situation that existed under the National Firearms Act and ruled on in Haney's. Just like in the NFA of 1934, which required registration within 60 days, all persons in Illinois who possessed PICA-regulated firearms are supposed to register their firearms, 50 BMG ammunition, and accessories on or before December 31st. Possession of these PICA-regulated items after December 31st, 2023 is, drumroll, interesting to see that in a legal document, a crime. Do not take plaintiffs' or their attorney's word for it. Look at the defendant. Kelly himself says that it's posted on the website with an exclamation point there. So again, you've got them spelling out all of the different frequently asked questions that there are, seeming to kind of go contrary to some of the language that we used in the state's filing. So you've got the voluntary benefit that the state argued. Defendants first argued that its registration provides a voluntary benefit to the registrants that exempts owners from criminal prosecution. This is simply untrue, Mag says. And as shown above, defendant's own website admits the prosecution authorities, they may consider late registration insufficient to avoid prosecution, coupled with the fact that, as noted in the ISP, as provided and will provide the information to every law enforcement agency in Illinois, there is no benefit to registration at this point unless the registrant was previously exempt. All a late registration does is admit the person filing same committed a crime. So again, it goes on to spell out and to counter a lot of what the state said. State said that no one's compelled. They say that that's a falsehood in the sense that no one is ultimately compelled to continue to breathe. The statement is literally true. But just as failing to breathe has obvious consequences, so does failing to register a possessed PICA-regulated firearm under PICA. Assuming no exemption, there is a criminal penalty as set forth, and it spells out the law. It says a person convicted of failure to possess a FOID card is required by Section 2 of the Act, or complete an electronic endorsement affidavit is required by the section, commits a Class A misdemeanor or Class 3 or 4 felony. So we've covered all of that as well. So interesting to see some of the back and forth here from the state and what they're having to say versus what the plaintiffs are arguing. So you've got the plaintiffs saying that they need a ultimately summary judgment, which is a final definitive answer on this Fifth Amendment question. So that's ultimately the conclusion here. To the end, plaintiffs renew their request for summary judgment in their favor of the self-incrimination Fifth Amendment issues and joining defendants and those acting in concert with or under the authority of defendants. So there you go. The latest in the Southern District, just with the Fifth Amendment arguments, right? So summary judgments being requested. When we'll see summary judgment on this, unsure. But we know that the overall case with all four plaintiffs groups going forward in Judge Stephen McGlynn's courtroom in the Southern District of Illinois with the status hearing set for February 28th. So that's just in less than 2 weeks here. So we'll be watching all of that and updating you each and every weekday morning here with Bishop on Air. Greatly appreciate you guys being here. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join me around this time each and every weekday morning as we break things down. Appreciate all of you guys, and we'll be back with more. As always, stay tuned with Bishop on Air. The Illinois legislature returns next week. They are set to hear Governor J.B. Pritzker's budget address. We'll find out, Illinois taxpayers, how the governor plans to spend your money for the coming fiscal year that begins July 1st. And in the meantime, you've got a primary election in March. Between the start of the budget and the governor's budget address, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But there is a ton. There's a ton of different pieces of legislation being put out. And part of all of that includes different priorities that legislators are putting out there. One in particular is interesting to see as it continues to evolve is whether or not we change our voting system in Illinois to be ranked choice voting. So we'll hear some of what the most recent ranked choice and voting system task force in Illinois had to say. They held their first meeting, and it got off to a bit of a bumpy start because the task force approved with legislation last year. The governor signed. It creates this task force, and there's people, appointed, and you've got members from the Democrats majority in the House and the Senate that are appointed. You've got members from the Republican minority in the House and the Senate that are appointed, and others that are appointed as well. But the co-chairs and the task force law spells out that the co-chairs are to be selected from the appointees from the Senate president, a Democrat, and the appointees of the House Speaker, a Democrat. So the question is this going to be a truly bipartisan look at the possible impacts of ranked choice voting? You're asking yourself, what's ranked choice voting? All right, ranked choice voting is you've got, say, 6 people on a ballot. No party designation, or just 6 people on a ballot. And you choose and you rank which one's your first choice, which one's your second choice, which one's your third choice, so on. And then when they start to tally all of that up, they refine it to be, well, if your third choice didn't get in, then your votes go to the next choice that you had. So that's kind of how ranked choice voting works in a 30,000 foot view. So I don't practically, I'm not sure how it would ultimately play out with timelines and whatnot. But that's what some people want to bring about in the state of Illinois. And they are looking to investigate this and report on this. And they've got a report due sometime next year. And they're hoping to attempt ranked choice voting for, I believe, the 2028 presidential primary. So looking at the calendar here, that would be in about 4 years where we could see ranked choice voting used for that. But they have to go through this task force and all this. But again, the question of whether this is going to be a bipartisan review with certain concerns heard, well, we'll see. The first meeting of the ranked choice voting task force in Illinois started off with people feeling that it was partisan. Again, the co-chairs selected only from the Democrats. And Ryan Spain, a Republican state representative from Peoria, he had some concerns to share right off the bat.
Thank you very much. And no further nominations, but I'll just stop and make a point here, and certainly appreciate and have a lot of respect for Leader Murphy, Chairman West. But it strikes me that this is the exact kind of topic that would benefit from the type of bipartisan leadership that we apply. And I think it works well, whether it's at JCAR or COGFA. And when we're dealing with elections issues like this, it gives a particular emphasis to why bipartisanship should matter. And unfortunately, I think this only serves to enhance some of the suspicion that is lingering out there about the topic of ranked choice voting. So as a result, I'll be voting present on the nominations for Leader Murphy and Chairman West.
So that was, again, State Representative Ryan Spain raising his concerns about partisanship. State Senator Seth Lewis also shared some of his concerns about partisanship.
And I was given assurances that this committee would not be presented that way, but even in the first discussions, it appears that there is partisanship by many members, by some members, in their initial comments. However, I promised I would not create controversy, and I will vote yes.
So we've got that as well moving through. State Senator Laura Murphy, who's one of the co-chairs, she said that there's no partisanship here.
I have to address concerns that, we don't legislate in a partisan fashion. I don't envision this committee would be any different. Or let me say, I don't legislate in a partisan fashion. We encourage input. So I understand some of those that might be a little unfamiliar with our process that we operate in the Senate, but certainly as Senator Lewis knows, this is going to be a fair, bipartisan, inclusive committee.
So Senator Murphy, a Democrat co-chair, saying, hey, they're going to work in a bipartisan fashion, even though you got the Democrats leading the committee. And this is different than other bipartisan committees that there are at the State House. You've got the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, which we've talked about, is a truly bipartisan committee. It's got equal number Republicans, equal number Democrats. I believe the Legislative Audit Commission has equal number Republicans, equal number Democrats. I believe that the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability has equal number Republicans, equal number Democrats. This is not the case for the Ranked Choice and Voting System Task Force in the state of Illinois. State Representative Maurice West, Democrat from Rockford, another co-chair of the committee, he shared his concerns about those saying that this is partisan.
Members may feel that it seems like it may have started on a partisan level, but I assure you that the conversations that we will be having on ranked choice voting, every member on this team will be valued. Whatever you need to say about ranked choice will be listened and taken into consideration. I too do not like operating in a partisan fashion. I too desire for us to come out of this with some effort from both sides of the aisle. So for those of you who said, I don't know much about you guys to vote, I totally understand. We'll get to know each other because this is an important topic, not just for one party, but for all voters. So I'm looking forward to having this conversation with all of you.
So again, you got Maurice West sharing his thoughts, saying that he doesn't want this to be partisan. He's going to work towards it not being partisan. So we'll see how that plays out. Meanwhile, you've got other measures that are being talked about. Republican State Senator Sue Rezin has a measure where she wants to ultimately require individuals to show social media companies their identification as part of an effort to protect kids. So Senator Rezin, and you'll see the report I posted with thecentersquare.com, saying that Illinois legislators want social media ID. Others saying it's a violation of free speech. So Senator Rezin, with her Safe Screens, Healthy Minds initiative, would practically do a few things. One, it would require that the code in developing social media has high-level privacy settings by default for kids and parents to be able to use in easy spelled-out terms. You've also got the another measure that Senator Rezin wants just in Illinois to have social media companies with a hotline that parents and kids can call if they have concerns. And then the third proposal is a measure that would require anybody using social media to show or somehow have an identification verification process. And this is where you get some civil libertarians like, whoa, hold on a second. So there's a couple of different things that I talked with a policy analyst from the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, David McGarry. He's a policy analyst with the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. And he said there's a whole host of things that, number one, need to be addressed, including, some of the proponents of regulating social media to this degree say, hey, there's all these studies about the harm to young people from social media. David McGarry says, well, there's other studies that might point to other problems with that research.
I think that like I said, it's a much more nuanced and complicated picture than the folks who want to heavily regulate social media make it out to be. Now, with that as a backdrop, the question becomes how should the government regulate social media, if it should regulate social media? Because there's also tension between what are parental rights and responsibilities surrounding making what choices their children, or making choices for their children's media and other consumption habits. And there's a trade-off between the parental rights and responsibilities and the government stepping in to micromanage these things. And one thing that the government has to consider while it is really doing anything is whether or not proposals will accord with the Constitution. And one of the huge problems with age verification proposals, which with many of the age-appropriate design proposals, and with some of the other kid safety bills, is that they all, or many of them, tend to run afoul of the First Amendment. They place either impermissible barriers on the speech of all users, or they just blanketly take kids off of social media, which the Supreme Court has said would. The Supreme Court has said that children have some sort of First Amendment rights. They're not the same as adults, but you can't simply just remove children's access to broad swaths of speech based on vibes or because you think that there could be some harms that are occurring. David
McGarry goes on to talk a little bit more about some of the different arguments against regulating social media to this degree, but he also delved into the idea of these patchworks, right? If Illinois, or just one little part of landlocked land in the middle of the country, if we have certain regulations in place that are regulating internet, then, you've got what happens in Missouri, what happens in Utah, what happens in some of these other places, because they don't have the same laws. They might have to. Well, I'll just let David McGarry explain it.
Yeah, there's no way for media or technology companies to navigate the patchwork scenario. The internet, as you point out, is international commerce, really, but it's certainly interstate commerce, and having different privacy regimes, having different content moderation regimes, having different kid safety regimes across different states would be costly and disastrous. And I would also note that it would incentivize tech companies to make policies that would comply with the most draconian regimes that are found in the country. So, for example, like there's the famous California effect, right? Where you'll see California come up with some terrible regulation, and then businesses, to avoid this patchwork status, will simply just comply with California's regulations, which then subjects much of the rest of the country, or the rest of the country, to all the negative consequences of California's regulation. So I do think it's a major concern, and like I said, and I want to stress this, it's not just one patchwork that we would have. It's layers on layers of patchworks, because, as I said, there are privacy regimes that are going to differ between states. There are content moderation regimes that are going to differ between states. We've had states suggest different digital taxation regimes or streaming taxation regimes. Those could differ between states. Kid safety regimes. There is some distinctions between.
So McGarry, he goes on to explain just the different types of regimes that could be stacked on top of each other. But we also talked about the just impacts on free speech. I mean, keep in mind, Abe Lincoln, those history buffs out there, you guys know this, but Abe Lincoln regularly criticized his political opponents in editorials that weren't written by Abe Lincoln. He would use a pseudonym. All right, very similar to if you go on Twitter and you see a bunch of people who have some NPC, face thing. It's obviously not the real name. They just go out there and they troll. All right, trolling is not necessarily, polite, right? It's not like everybody should troll. People look at trolls in a negative light, but it's still free speech. More from David McGarry.
Certainly. So the issue with age verification is that for the most part, we're looking at one of two methods of age verification. In one case, you would submit a government document, say a scan and ID, and then in the other, you would allow either the platform or some third-party vendor to scan your face to try to determine whether or not you have the facial features of someone who is over whatever the threshold age is. I'm going to leave aside all the data security implications that this would have, because they're many and scary and they're in a different conversation, but to focus on the First Amendment issues. The First Amendment protects your right to speak anonymously. This is settled law. The Supreme Court in a case called McIntyre versus Ohio Elections Commission came out and said this very clearly. Going back to the authors of the Federalist Papers, Madison, Hamilton, and Jay, who published under the name Publius, American history is replete with people who have exercised their right to speak anonymously. And while there are certainly many people online who I think most of us would agree abuse this right, that doesn't mean that under our constitutional system, the government can come in and make those calls.
With the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and he sounded off and shared some of his thoughts. I do just want to reinforce with those watching live, for some reason, right around this time every morning, despite me boosting the internet speed and paying my internet service provider even more, it seems to drop. I don't know what maybe I should just get on customer service for 40 minutes and wait for somebody to talk to me and tell me why it does that, because it happens a lot. But we do record these segments remotely, so we get those out to you throughout the day. That's why it's important you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. All right, it is Bishop on Air. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you so much for hanging out with us each and every weekday morning. Starting at about 7:40ish, we go live Central Time, hang out with you, and if you are live with us, you can join the Discord. I would ensure that you do this by going to bishoponair.com or in the video description of the live link, and we can only do this when you're live, all right? So get into the Discord channel. I've got the stage set up, so we'll start that stage, and we'll hear from you next here with Bishop on Air. Brock, I think it is something to do with school starting. I do live very close to a school, so it could be because the schools are starting as to the internet. Oh well. All right, hey, let's get your calls. I want to know your thoughts about ShotSpotter ending in Chicago. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about with your Discord calls. Stay tuned here with Bishop on Air.